if you read about the people who have been doing this for 10, 20 years, or if you listen to their podcast, they're scared. And they've been spending decades thinking about this. And so, yes, I think on a purely human level, I think it's hard for us to think about what it would be like with a being that could potentially become smarter than we are. I mean, I know smarter people than what I am, and I'm sure you do too, and most of the listeners will as well. But somebody said it's not like us looking at monkeys; it's like us looking at trees. So the trees communicate via fungi, and they take forever, right? And so somebody said, like, well, AI could be the same thing. Like, they're going to kind of look at us not like as a threat, but as like, God, these humans are slow. So I think it's hard for me to fathom what it would be like for another entity looking at us as trees, right? So it's just hard to know where that world would lead, and does that scare me? Yeah, partially it scares me. I also find it fascinating. But yeah, I'm very interested personally in the subject, and yes, it scares me.
I'm Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked, Season 12, Unlimited Edition, the case for more creativity in business. And today's episode features a huge injection of innovation in the form of Henrik Kjellberg, whose last name I have been working on all day, and I hope I got correct, and whose company, Awaze, is one of the largest vacation rental management companies in the world. Certainly one of the best run large management companies in the world. Now, what I like most about the conversation with Henrik is how his version of creativity includes having difficult discussions about new kinds of spaces that we haven't necessarily faced before. So Henrik and his company got here because of standards, because of consistency, because of scale and efficiencies that he was able to leverage that, like a lot of our listeners, became his big differentiator in any given market. After all, if you are a vacation rental manager offering a standard in any given fragmented or inconsistent market, you by default kind of become the leader. However, the twist comes when we realize how much change is coming to each independent market. And Henrik, as the CEO of such a large company, is responsible for incorporating new ways of thinking and more agile, more fluid kinds of decision-making within his organization that is very different from the linear kind of efficiencies that got him here in the first place. And for people like Henrik and myself, this other new world of adapting to change is not necessarily our strong suit. What I think this conversation proves is that a great starting point is simply starting to talk about this stuff, this new territory that we're not necessarily comfortable in, but that the more we talk about, the more we familiarize ourselves with, that becomes the innovation unto itself. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Awaze is a property management software that serves like the transmission of a car for any growing vacation rental management organization. It's the foundation atop which you want to build. Now, the interview today with Henrik has a lot of commonalities with the philosophy of Awaze's CEO, Paul Waldschmidt, who I got the chance to know quite well, along with his co-founder, Chris, at their company retreat this past December in the Dominican Republic. One thing that really stood out to me was the emphasis on curiosity, of asking better questions, and like Henrik says later on in this interview, wanting to be right a whole lot less than wanting to get the answer correctly. Two very different mindsets and two very different values that tend to permeate any given organization. And that was certainly the case with each of the teammates that I met at Awaze. They're very simply, genuinely curious people. And I like to think that curious operators tend to resonate with that. You can head over to their website, awaze.com, and inquire about doing a demo. You can be all the curious you want. Ask them any question you may have. Really get an idea for what Awaze is, but also What is the role of a property management software company in the future of vacation rentals as a whole? I guarantee each member of that team would be more than excited to share with you their own vision and curiously ask you for yours. Mention that you heard it on the podcast and they'll offer a special discount. Now let's get into that good stuff with Henrik Kjellberg.
The tricky thing with being a leader is you want to be decisive because that helps the team. You also want to be really open-minded and a good listener because I don't have all the best ideas. And so you're trying. So I hope I'm getting better at that balance with time. I can be quite a forceful, kind of energetic character, and so there's a lot of strength that comes with that because you need a big battery pack if you're the CEO. There's a lot of weakness as well because you can intimidate people and kind of shut down a conversation. And that's something that I'm aware of that I can do. And I can be curt. And I say, like, I'm not going to say like, oh, but that's a wonderful quality. Like it's actually not a good quality. So I have to make sure I temper that. But then you also don't want to become ambiguous or, and when you do it. So it's a tricky balance. I try to ask for feedback. Now that's easy to say, but you also want to create the environment where people feel comfortable giving you feedback or giving me feedback. And so it's like, oh yeah, but just tell me what you think. Sure. But okay. But I genuinely care about trying to become a better leader. To me, it's important. I had the benefit of having great leaders in my past. And so I feel I want to pass it on. And I'm trying very hard to do that.
It's interesting how much awareness you mentioned goes into that game of being aware that there's an unknown that you want to improve that you're not necessarily versed in and you're not familiar with. Listening is such a wonderful skill that does take lots of practice. I've found myself really being an active listener is a real workload. I mean, if you're actively listening to somebody for 30 minutes, it's like a little bit exhausting, but you can learn so much.
There's a lot of people who want to be right. Very few who are interested in the right answer. And so that is a good guiding principle. Like how do you get right? And the only way to get there is by listening and asking tough, challenging questions and getting the best out of the team. And that's hopefully how you find that, or then you will maximize your chances of finding the right answer.
I love that. For businesses big and small. What is Awaze's footprint at the moment, just so listeners can familiarize themselves with how many moving parts you're dealing with here?
So we've got about 2,500 employees. We operate in 16 markets. We have, I believe today, around 115,000 units that we sell. And we have 3 main brands, Novasol, Cottages.com, and House Seasons, that sell those products.
When you look at the local markets where you're located and you have other vacation rental managers and property owners who are perhaps self-managing, what do you feel that category of smaller entity can do better than Awaze?
The benefit of smaller, especially if you are in a location, I mean, we are also in some of the locations. So, but clearly the big benefit of being small is you know the area. You can go to a property that's been flooded. You can help out. I mean, you're close to not only the property, but also knowing what's going on in the area and what's impacting. I think that's harder to do at scale. I mean, I would need to have an office everywhere. We have in every small village of the UK and Croatia. Obviously, we have many, but we don't have that many. So yeah, the smaller guys can be very good at offering a very warm. So one is being close, and the second one I would say is if it's a very bespoke service. Let's say everybody gets a welcome pack with 3 bottles of Prosecco and fresh flowers. I mean, that is something that for us at scale just doesn't work. And some small operators do that really, really well.
And conversely, so if you're an operator, you're listening, those are some nice things to double down on. Where are the areas that you find that those small operators are getting stuck in this new world of ours that's changing?
There are some benefits there are many benefits of scale. One is it's just expensive to build a technology platform and to create consumers and guests are getting spoiled. They want a simple to use website. It's very hard to build a simple to use quick website. Our pricing engine has the benefit. I mean, we do over 500,000 pricing changes a day in the UK automatically. So we just cluster things and we don't, and it's just looking at booking pace, trying to optimize for the owner. It's not because we're smarter, it's just because we have more data. We can do fraud analysis. We can offer service in local languages, translation services. Those things are just easier to do with scale, and that's one of the reasons we've been investing in creating a common platform so that we're trying to basically create what feels to the owner a more personalized digital experience than what you can if you're just doing it by yourself. So you can create a more personalized personal experience if you close to the owner, because you're Bob, but you live next to Susan who has the house. But with data, we can create a more personalized experience because we have one common platform, so you can personalize that, and you can use the data to create something that feels very unique to the owner. So that's the benefit, of scale.
So are you suggesting that the smaller operators in this sense are at a disadvantage when competing with a larger organization that can leverage this type of resource?
I think there is. Look, the market is much. I used to work in the OTA space. I used to work for a big company called Expedia, and when I started in online travel in 2001, actually 1999, I was before Expedia in Sweden. There were lots and lots of small players around, and it kind of consolidated very quickly. It became like a Booking.com, Expedia, a few big players. I think our market, the vacation rental market, is going to remain much more fragmented, but some level of consolidation will still happen because of the benefits of scale. So yes, there is definitely a need for local players. They will keep being around. I think those local players will be around because they either offer that specialized service or, they're very local presence that helps them do it.
The other day I was on a podcast in which I was receiving the questions, and we spent 45 minutes talking about the mounting difficulties for operators. So I expressed my concerns about regulation, which I know you're very passionate about. I said I thought 2024 was about to be a bloodbath in terms of regulation on municipalities and communities that had never even thought it was their problem suddenly coming down hard. We talked about the overwhelming technology stack that's borderline like impossible to keep balanced. We talked about the environmental changes that are happening. We talked about the margins that are famously thin in this business to begin with that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And then the final question he asked me, he's like, so what's your tip? What's your one tip? And I thought about it for a second. I was like, man, I would be like lying if I didn't give the tip. Don't do it. Don't get into this uphill battle like Sisyphus trying to push a massive boulder up a hill unless, and I was kind of, being a little cheeky because it was a short-term rental podcast, unless you're really passionate and excited about doing this for a reason. And that was kind of my way of, I surprised myself a little bit in giving that advice. Do you see those mounting threats sort of shifting the landscape in Europe for operators?
Sure. Are you familiar with the concept of Fun 1 and Fun 2?
No. Tell me.
So Fun 1 is fun while you're doing it. So you're on the beach, sipping a margarita. Fun 1, right?
Okay.
Fun 2 is you're running a marathon. It sucks. you're hurting. It's about like it's amazing after the effect, right? So I think anybody joining travel, it's a little bit the same thing. It's like it's fun too, right? It's gonna hurt when you do it, but then it's at the same time you get this. It's an incredible category where like you get to meet the owners, all the personal relationships, you get to sort of work with the technology side, which is fascinating in itself. And it's something like, all my kind of when I go to dinner party or something, all my friends like, I mean, everybody loves to talk about travel. It's fun, it's addictive. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, no, stay out. You get all these travel startups. It's like, why are they in travel? Because people are passionate about the category. So yes, but I think it's this kind of type 2 type of fun. Okay, sometimes fun one as well, but definitely fun too. But yes, going to your questions, I'm diverging. Europe, I would argue, is almost worse than the US. We have in Europe, I'm in the UK now, but if you kind of look at UK, Europe, a lot of the legislation is moving in tandem. Scotland implemented a registration scheme that was disastrous for the local economy. Nobody knows how to get a license. It's crazy. And the European Commission is currently looking at, they just launched something called DAC 7, requiring us to collect data on bank account details and tax numbers and send it into and it's different in every country. So very uncoordinated, creating lots of red tape in a very poor fashion. So obviously we're lobbying, so actually my general counsel, Rupa, is in Brussels as we speak, meeting with the commission, trying to educate them on all the good this category does in terms of employment, all the other things, also tax revenues, because the owners already do pay tax. But yeah, I think it's gone overboard. I think there's been a very aggressive hotel lobby. It's one of the factors, and they clearly are targeting Airbnb because Airbnb is not paying VAT, etc. So that's been. So then I think we are a fallout from that partially. And the second thing we have, which I believe, I'm not sure it's the same extent in the US, but I think you have some of it as well, which is when local rents get too high and the vacation rental category gets blamed for it. So Portugal was one example. They had lots of digital visas. They revoked them all because rents became too high or allegedly too high. I think I understand where the sentiment comes from. We think we have data that proves that that's not happening. But yeah, those things have driven a lot of legislation. That legislation is uncoordinated and very hard to get on top of. And yeah, that worries us. I'm not a fan, and we're trying to make sure we inform the legislative branches wherever we operate as much as possible in terms of all the good this category does as well, and to make sure they don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
I think one of the other, back to our earlier point about skills that are worth developing as leaders as we move forward, a lot of sort of innovation and disruption is rooted in thinking outside of the box and creativity and imagination beyond what we knew in the past. But that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. At least most of us don't think of ourselves as creatives. Do you have any way of incentivizing, rewarding, creating a culture of creative thinking within Awaze?
So I read this quote, which I think was from, who was it from? The name of the company, like, execution pays for innovation. So it's so easy, or I heard something like, the other way to look at it is like, so it's people want to do the poetry, not the plumbing.
I love that.
But you need the plumbing, right?
Right.
So, and in fact, if you look at what's happened, even look, I started running my first online travel website in 1998, right? So that's a long time ago. And actually, not a lot has happened since then. There's not a whole lot of innovation. The only thing is that it just works better, because when you try to book a ticket at that time, half of the time your payment wouldn't work, or like it took forever. And so it's gone faster. You have more pictures. It's easier. And so a lot of the innovation is actually making it simpler for people to. It sounds really boring, but like I'm a big fan of this, the plumbing part, like because everybody, especially team members, like, oh, I want to work on like the new cool sexy thing, and like if I look at travel, like, well, I don't know that like anything fundamentally new has happened in travel in the last 20 years. I just don't. It's just better execution of of what was already there. And that sounds really boring. At the same time, it's a sort of if you look at total travel, including vacation rental, flights, and everything, accommodation, it's almost a $2 trillion value category globally. 2 trillion. Like that's, I think the US GDP is 16 trillion. So like this, it's big. And so that's one of the biggest categories in online, any category. And yeah, it's kind of doing what it was doing 15, 20 years ago. But I still think there's lots of innovation in it in terms of customer reviews, lots of things that have happened. But it's not, oh, wow, this is completely different to anything we saw. I mean, if you look at other categories like media, okay, so you have TikTok, you have, things that didn't even exist 5 years ago, right? Those, but that we don't really have that in travel. It's kind of solidified a bit. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
So if we were to fly you into any given operator's business, your instinct to look at the data of this whatever company you're flying into, and I've heard you use before the phrase telling a story with data, and I love how stories can move us in ways that maybe graphs can't, or stats. Would that be something that you would then kind of make sense of the different metrics in any given business and sort of try to loop it together with some story, some kind of like context for what is happening here?
It's a great question. And I was just listening to a podcast with Lex Friedman and Jeff Bezos, which stuck with me because and I think Bezos called it the tyranny of the proxy. So the good thing with data is you kind of measure things. And so like, okay, so now we're measuring, okay, I'll give you an example, cleaning scores. So we come up with a way to sort of measure how good our cleaning is, and we measure that. Now, what's important here is actually not the cleaning. So I'll come to the cleaning score is a proxy, we hope, for how clean the house is. But what's really important is, are we giving the guests, as clean, are they arriving in a clean house that they're happy with, so that, then the guests will want to come back forever and ever and ever and just book through our direct channels. So the danger with data sometimes, and what you have to be mindful of when you implement it, is that because the organization will start optimizing towards the cleaning score. And people are clever, they're driven by incentives. So it's not that they're cheating or doing anything, but, they'll figure out that actually the new houses are easier to get a higher cleaning score than the old houses. So suddenly whereas the old houses maybe are very picturesque and they have a better location closer to the beach, and therefore it might lead to us skewing which inventory we have. So that suddenly you have fewer of the good properties on the beach, which are the older ones, because people want to get the new houses. So the danger is what Bezos called the tyranny of the proxy, is that you have this KPI or a number you measure towards, but people have forgotten why you measure it. So it's not about getting a great cleaning score. So if the older houses, on average get a 4 out of 5, and the newer ones get a 5 out of 5. But a 4 is amazing because actually I was in some of those old houses. They're just harder to clean. So even though they're clean, they don't look as clean. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should stop having them. But what happens if you don't explain the why you have a certain KPIs, and this happens everywhere, is people start optimizing towards the proxy without forgetting why do you have it. So to your question, it's a long one that says you have to remind people of why you have a KPI. Or why you're looking at some data. It's because you're trying to infer something from it that, it's either around delighting owners, or it should be around delighting guests, or, driving more profitability. And so that I think the danger when you are, I think I'm reasonably data driven. The danger is the data takes over and you forget to tell the narrative or the story around it. Like, why are we looking at this? Because so you start off with the best of intentions, and if left unchecked, it can lead you astray. And I think that's part of the job as any leader, like anywhere in the organization, is to question, like, well, why are we looking at this? A cleaning score is one of them, but there could be many others. For example, you can look at online. We look very carefully at conversion. So how many of the people that come into, let's say, colleges.com book? So of course, if 100 people come in, given we pay for some of the traffic, you want as many as possible to book. If you have an owner app, for example, it's like, or if you have an app, like you may be different. You may actually want people to come in a lot to kind of build affinity to the brand, so without booking, so that you have recency. So then you should be careful not to try to drive towards conversion. So it's always around kind of understanding the why you're looking at a certain metric and what is it driving towards. And I think to that point, yes, it's important to explain why you have a metric and what the story is behind it. I'm super excited about the product generally getting better and better. I think the consumer experience is the guest experience is getting better. I think it's getting easier from a technology perspective to book many of these holiday homes. I think it's become much more mainstream. We can argue about Airbnb, but like what Airbnb has done to the category is my mother's understands what I do now. Like she didn't before.
Me too.
And so we don't do what Airbnb does. I mean, we have a very different offering, but I think it's opened up the category. And when you look at travel and the growth that will come, travel in general, and then to this category, so I'm very excited about the future growth prospects and the improvement in quality that I believe will come to the category as well. That really excites me.
And what about for Henrik, the non-CEO? What's the most exciting thing in your life that you're looking forward to these days?
We've actually booked a number of trips to many of our properties. So I've got one coming up in Mallorca where I'm doing a cycle race. In one of our incredible properties there, I've invited a bunch of my cycling buddies. Actually, my wife is coming as well. We have a chef coming for a few days, eating Spanish food. So I'm super excited about that. And so on the non-CEO part, I've been basically booking up, I'm going to, we actually don't have any properties, but this summer I'm doing a gravel bike race in Iceland. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, I've been booking some of those things up, and then of course work keeps me busy, but obviously also looking forward to meeting industry colleagues at conferences and stuff, but that's more on the CEO stuff. But no, we've got I've been able to, I think we were in a position where life became like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then of course, if my kids are watching this, I miss you a lot too. And I hope they're doing well at uni, but yeah, it's been great.
It's working in a lot of our listeners are running small businesses, small family businesses. It gets exhausting. Oftentimes you're working by yourself. You don't take a whole lot of breaks. You end up getting stressed or tired, and that ends up rubbing off on your team, which ends up oozing onto guests or homeowners in one way or another. Taking a break, getting some space. And a lot of times it's terrifying. Like, what's going to happen if I leave for a week or a month? Like, is the entire business going to fall apart? Do I have the right people in place? Would somebody make my judgment call like me in my place? That's a very real, scary kind of predicament to be in. But I can't underscore enough how important, how vital the battery pack, as you put it, of the leader is in any organization, because otherwise it won't last.
Yes, I think it's important. Obviously today, a lot of things about mental health and, social media does it. So yeah, holiday is a great thing. And I think our industry offers a great number of choices where people can go and experience a great product. And it's part of what gets me addicted to this category is you actually don't have to go far. Like I mentioned the Mallorca trip, but you can go to here in the UK, which even though the weather is not always amazing, today it's pretty not amazing. But you go to Cornwall, or you go to Cornwall to Wales, or there's these incredible picturesque villages and just an incredible experience. So for any of the owners listening who want a good holiday in the UK or indeed in Denmark, send me an email. We have a friends and family program. I'd be happy to sort of give you a discount, and you can come visit the old world.
So, listeners, you heard it here. If you're looking to book a home with Awaze, just tell whichever customer representative that Henrik said you could have a discount. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. One thing that really struck me about this interview, which comes right on the heels of our interview with Ruth Manfredi, who manages her own properties in Cinque Terre, Italy, is that the leading home runners, Henrik being such a wonderful example, and Ruth as well, each have their own very unique style of hospitality. It's very different from one home runner to the next, depending on your goals, depending on your strengths, and depending on where you want to write your story. I think getting to that point, that clarity, that decisiveness with what is my style of hospitality, is something that requires work, and it's not necessarily natural to many of us who may have leaned on standardization or systems or efficiencies to get us to this point. That is a very separate world of business than starting to think outside the box and starting to have conversations about things that don't yet exist and go places we haven't yet been. This is characteristic of the future of vacation rentals for me, and there's no better person to take us there than Henrik. If you'd like to join myself and other guests this season in VRMB community, we are actively collaborating under one virtual roof, working towards this limited edition style of hospitality, whatever that may mean for you. Just head over to vrmb.com. You can sign up for the newsletter, or you can join our community, where over 1,200 operators are creatively collaborating under one virtual roof. That's vrmb.com.